Fans of Horus Heresy and Warhammer 40,000, thank you very much for joining me for part 6 of my guide to building the Fellblade tank. And in this installment, we're going to talk about the tracks, tracking the tracks. Well, we're going to do two things actually. We're going to talk about the tracks, but before we do that, we're just going to pick up from the last video, and I'm going to talk about attaching these side units, these two here, onto the hull that I previously assembled. Just to recap then, at the end of part 5, I'd assembled the hull, so we had everything put together, and I just finished off by saying, having put it all together, that these two were now no longer quite right aligned, and I thought I was going to have to go back and do some more heat bending, and sure enough I did. I had to reheat manipulate these two parts to fit them. What was the result of that? Well, it was actually been very successful, and we've got a nice fit in the end. To give you an idea of what I did, it was a bit of heat manipulation on this section of the upper deck, here and here, and in both instances it needed just lifting a slight touch, and that's to get this aligned here. This is a flat attachment face here, so we've got the upper hull like so, and then you've got the side plate that attached on that. There's no grooves, pins or slots to locate it, so you're having to use this upper edge and the front and the rear to get it lined up. So I did do that, did a bit more bending here, got a real good fit at the front here and here in the end. That worked out really well. This one actually fit better than I thought it was going to. And then in terms of attaching it on the inside, well, let me see if I can get a good view. So you can see you've got these pins, there's a series of these that run down here, and they serve as a guide for this resin piece here. Now you'll see there's a groove there. The pins are not necessarily going to fit into that groove, so don't worry too much if they don't, as long as you've got an attachment. I then splurged a load of glue on the end of those pins when I was sticking it. In terms of where I did glue these, I glued it along here, along this edge here, and then also put glue on the pins as well, and that's given a really strong attachment. I can feel how sturdy and solid that is. So that was those. So I got those on, and then the next thing I had to do was fit the road wheels, these guys here. And these, as you can see, are plastic components from the Fellblade kit, and there's a front set and a rear set. These inner ones are already on, it's the outer ones we're looking at. Now, was this all plain sailing? No, it wasn't. It did require a couple of bits of work. And before I fitted these, I spent some time test fitting the actual tracks as well. And that led me to notice I was going to need to raise these outer wheels up a little bit in the grooves which run along the track unit front to back. When I sort of put them in as far as they'll go, the wheels were slightly inclined inwards and they're slightly lower than the inner ones. So I just basically had to do a load of glue splurge, and I also put tiny bits of glue on some of the rims where it was contacting the side arm of the armour skirt to get those in position. And as you can see, they're pretty level now, the inner and the outer ones. And when I place the tank hull on the floor, that's a pretty flat fit. Maybe a soup's on of movement, but by the time I stick the main tracks on, that'll be fine. What I then did is I test fitted the actual tracks all the way around and discovered a couple of things. What the instructions tell you is to stick this piece on first, then this piece, then the sprocket or the idler, then this piece, then this, then the rear drive wheel, and then the final piece of track. I wouldn't stick anything in place until you test fit it. So I then test fitted the tracks, and what it goes is it goes like this. So you've got number 1, and they're actually numbered on the parts, which is really good and very helpful. And the arrow points this way. So the arrows go like this around the track. If we put it around here, the arrow's pointing that way. So where you've got arrows, they need to be orientated that way. If we do the left side, because that's what we've got. So we've got left 1, then left 2. They go like that. So we can see got a nice fit there. You may want to spend time doing some bit of sanding on here, and also along these grooves here. I had to cut that notch in to get a fit, to basically get the track level and parallel between the armour skirt and the hull side armour plate. And that might take you a bit of time to do. I know it certainly did for me. Once you got there, then the next thing is we've got this assembly We've got the sprocket wheel mount, or the front wheel mount, and then we've got this, what we're presuming is the idler wheel, and that's at part L3. Now this, as you can see, I've stuck together. These are two separate parts. And this is one of the most tricky parts of this entire kit to get this aligned properly. And just let me show you what you're trying to do. You're trying to do that, yeah? So this is fiendishly tricky to get right, in my view. Really, really difficult. And I found it difficult when I did my glaive, and I found it difficult when I did this, although I've got a better result this time round because of some experience. And what I would advise you do is get a good fit on this part and the wheel and these tracks, and stick this before you start assembling anything. So you need to do a test fit on the underside as well. I heated this section up here and pressed it in here to get a good fit. I also did some work cutting these notches a little bit bigger to accommodate this part, these notches here and these ridges on this side hull plate, which is a necessity, I would say, because straight out of the pack, the fit on these is not great. You want to be guided by the position of the wheel as opposed to this. That's what's essential, the position of the wheel, because you can see it's all going to line up nicely, yeah? Then I'll glue this. This isn't holding all the strength here because you've got a nice solid attachment point here, and then you're going to have another one here. And if we then look at the other side of a tank, here we've got the right sections. So right number 1 first. Then we've got right 2. And then the same assembly for right 3. There you go. Now that's, you can see that that's all going to line up nicely once it's stuck. Again, you want the position of this wheel being nice and true with the rest of the track and the side units and the hull to dictate your positioning, not getting this part properly or flat fitted on this, because it won't. It just the geometry of this part's all skewy, I find. But I won't worry about that, because as long as you put a decent amount of adhesive in here, it's going to be a very strong fit. And then when you combine that with the strength of the attachment here and underneath here to track piece number 4, it will be nice and solid. I strongly recommend you doing that. And let's go back to our initial example with the left hand side and flip her over. Hey, he said. Right, so that's going to sit like that. And then we've got piece L4. Now be careful, you make sure you get these orientated correctly with the hinges. And that's going to sit there like so. Then you've got the long L5 section. That's going to go on like that. Now, I can see, I've not fitted this yet, but I can see I need to do a bit of bending again with this, because although it's flat, it's got a slight curve on it. So yes, I'm going to do that. The point I'm making there is this doesn't just need to be flat this way, it also needs to be straight along its length, and you can see the bend on this one. So it's a useful demonstration to understand that you have to bend this in more than one orientation to get a good fit. And that's going to sit on there, and then we're just going to have a quick look at this rear section here. The next piece is this one, which is L6, and that is going to sit like that, yeah? And that is bridging the gap to the rear drive wheel, and in this case it's part L7. Great band, L7. Reminds me of Natural Born Killers. That's a film and a half. And this part here, you see you've got this notch in the axle. That's going to go with this notch here. This is a bit of a tight fit, this one. And it brings me to kind of like the last point about the track unit. So I'm going to do a little bit of manhandling here to get that in like so. Right, you can see that's in now. Right, final note on doing these side sections. I found that you want to check that you can actually get these parts in once you've got the side units on and the rotor wheels on. I found one of these, when I put it in, it was under a lot of tension, and in the end what I ended up having to do was heat the whole side of this vehicle up again, so this whole unit was soft, and just pry it out a bit to open up this space a touch. A lot of hot water involved, and quite careful manoeuvring, having to be careful not to bend these armour skirts. One to watch because as I'd assembled it, one of the fits on these drive wheels was much too tight. If we go back to L6, which, does that go there? Yeah, it does actually. L6 goes there. And then if we grab L5, which is, I think this, oh yeah, it's that one there. Yeah, there's L5. That's going to go there like so. And voila, you got your tracks. And if we then drop L3 in position and L4, at this point, hopefully, we're going to achieve something of a semblance of everything lining up. I've not actually fitted this yet, but more or less it's there. I can see I've got some work to do getting the fit spot on, but that's just part of the course with this thing. It's just how it's going to be. That's the way to do it. Do test fit it all before you start gluing. That's my word of advice. It's not easy, but if you do take the time to do it, test fit things and just work out all the kinks and the warps and the bends, the end result will be much better and you'll feel a lot happier for it, because when you start sticking these bits on, you're not going to stick halfway through and then find out that something doesn't line up or fit properly. And that then brings us to the point with 2 sets of track parts prepared that I'm now ready to finally assemble the track units, and I'm going to do that in one go. So when we next come back to look at this tank, all the tracks will be on, and I'll have also put all the little details on as well, because this is pretty much done now, actually, believe it or not. Once those tracks are on, the hard work is completely finished. We've got the laser assemblies to make, but that's not too much of a big deal. Details to put on, like the demolisher cannon, exhaust ports, a couple of trim here, and then just doing some work on the turret. So actually, when you get to this stage, in my view, you just enter in the home straight, and things are going to get a lot easier now with the build, and it's all going to start to come together to the final vehicle. And as just a little tease, why not shall we just drop the turret on so we can start to just visualize a bit. I'm a little bit close in, but yeah, just visualize a bit what we're working towards. I'm hoping you're continuing to enjoy this series, taking an in-depth and detailed look at how best to put a Fellblade chassis tank together. As always, please do share your observations in the comments section. I'll be very interested to hear those as always. If you've got any questions about parts of the build that I might have covered or I'm coming up to, please do share those as well, and I'll see if I can incorporate those into an upcoming video. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.